Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Big East Rewind. I am your 7-foot host, Chuck Everson, and as I was reminded earlier, my 6'5" point guard, number 23 from Syracuse University, Sonny Spera. How are you, son?
Chuck, I'm doing great as always. I'm very excited about our guest.
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people know a lot about Ralph, so this is going to be a good one.
It'll be a lot of fun. Plus, we got another big guy, Sonny. I think I've run through the gamut of big people in the Big East, man.
I'm telling you, Ralph, he's got a thing, man.
I know you're a point guard. I don't want to get you upset, and and I think Ralph is the 7th member we counted before, right, of that '84 championship team that Georgetown had.
Yeah, the one that we've had on the show.
Yeah, 7th member from that team, which was pretty amazing. And frankly, it's been a lot of fun getting to know these guys because we've knocked down some barriers that have been built up, I guess you could say, over the years.
The cloud.
So it's
the cloud is gone, man. The cloud is gone.
The cloud is gone. So without any further ado, let me introduce our guest. Our guest was described by his Hoya teammates as loyal with a big heart, and he had the best attitude of anybody on the team. Nothing ever got him down. It was always positive experience for him. It was always positive and upbeat all the time, even though he had a severe knee injury that nearly cost him his career. So one of the nicest Hoyas on that '84 team. He went on to great success on Wall Street. Hoya legend, Ralph Dalton. How are you, Ralph?
That a Freudian slip?
Wow. That was, yeah. You talk about cutting things out, Ralph. We got to cut.
We might need to edit that.
That's funny.
So thank you for coming on and joining us, man.
Good to be here.
It's funny because this happened kind of like by luck, right, Ralph? I mean, you ran into a buddy of mine who played with my brother at Rutgers, Mark Peterson. He also played with Mark Plansky, who was a teammate of mine, and said he ran into you. He sends me this picture, and I said, "Holy cow, you better give me his number." So we got in touch, and here we are, like days later. So appreciate you spending some time with Sonny and I.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
And like I said, there's nothing to fear with the Orange and Hoya thing. That was, that's water under the bridge, Ralph. So
Yeah, nobody's
over it now.
Nobody harbors any animosity. Don't worry.
Just don't mention Manly Fieldhouse closing, and we're good, Ralph.
Yeah, let's leave that one out.
Don't mention Manly, and we'll be all right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's nothing about closing Manly. Let's not hear about that.
Yeah, he's a little sensitive about that. One thing. So originally from Maryland, right? And then you wind up going to the Fishburne Military Academy for a year. So to improve, I guess to work on your game. Was that it? Your grades were good, I was told.
Well, it was a combination of both, actually, to get myself academically ready for Georgetown, but as much as anything to work on my game as well. Yeah.
Okay. So who suggested that? Was that Coach John suggested that to you, or?
It was something that was put out there. And I knew I needed to, I grew up in the DC, Maryland area. And I knew the school system I came from was okay. But I also knew I needed to work on some things or whatever. So I thought it was a great idea, and it was something that I was very open to.
Now,
was that considered a prep school, or was that, what was it? What was it considered?
It's a prep school. Yeah, it's a military school, prep school, basically.
Okay.
Listen, this is not a big joke, Ralph, but like you had to wear military uniforms and everything too, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Well, how are they getting military uniforms for a guy 6'11"?
Well, the crazy thing is, and it is pretty crazy. The formal uniforms basically had to be tailored for me. I was the only way to get something to fit me. But the fatigues that I had to wear, they pieced them together, as crazy as it sounds, where they literally sewed something at the bottom of the fatigue so that it would fit better.
Okay.
That made it more manageable, and it made it at least relatively presentable.
Well, listen, the only guy in this room that can fully understand you, Ralph, is me right now. Because Sonny, even though he's 6'5", is considered a big guy amongst everybody else.
Yeah.
You and I are a little above that. So I feel your pain there, man. I mean, I understand. There's no Penny's catalog or something where you're going to go and get a
exactly
and stuff.
exactly.
So, okay. So now, you get to work on your game, and how does the recruitment process go for you?
Once I met John Thompson, and basically this 6'10" guy, dynamic speaker, it was never a question for me. It was what I wanted to do. And I didn't know, and it's crazy as it sounds, I didn't know a whole lot about Georgetown at the time. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but I was so impressed with Coach Thompson that I just thought it was an amazing opportunity, and it's what I wanted to do. Now, when I went to the military school and played, and we won our championships and all that, I was recruited by other schools, but it really wasn't anything I seriously entertained.
So when did you meet Coach Thompson, and when did you literally sounds like make up your mind that's your spot?
I met him the first time I met him, I was playing in a summer tournament. And that's when I was introduced to him. And then when the school year started, it was just opportunities presented itself, and it became more obvious that they were very interested in what in me. And quite honestly, that's when other opportunities presented themselves. And in that same summer, I got a chance, excuse me, I got a chance to play in some, tournaments, and got a little bit of travel and playing in tournaments at the high school level. And it just, it became obvious that I was relatively talented, but two, it just presented itself as a heck of an opportunity for something that I fully wanted to pursue.
So coming out of that Maryland, that DC Maryland area, is that considered like the DMV? Is that the area that where all of these great ballers came out of? So who are some of the guys that you were balling against in the park back then?
Back then, I don't know if there's any names that would stand out. The guy I played against that would really stand out that you remember is Thurl Bailey.
Oh, okay.
He was the first year I started playing basketball, I got a chance to play against him. At that point, he was, a level above me, but still, I was still relatively talented, and I think I played okay against him.
So were you one of those guys that played in the Y and got into pickup games there and went out to the asphalt and played out in the parks and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I grew up. I mean, and in addition, I mean, the DMV, yes, but also I grew up in, a good part of my life, the second half of my life at that point, I grew up in Prince George's County, which is where a lot of talent.
That's the place.
Yeah. So that's the area I grew up in. And I played a lot of ball on the asphalts and, outdoor courts in that area, whatever. And that's what I grew up doing or whatever. And honestly, when I was younger, when I first started, I wasn't very good. And then there were a couple of times when certain things happened, and it's almost like a light went off in my head, and I exponentially got better. And then something else would happen, and then I exponentially got better. And then I started realizing this could be a way out for me. This could be a way to advance and do some different things.
What were some of the things you were interested in? I mean, once that starts, and now you start thinking college, right? And you talked about, okay, academically, were you also thinking, hey, this is my potential academic, or were you still just focusing on maybe, hey, let's get basketball square so I can get there? What were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was a combination of both, right? I just saw basketball as my way out of, getting out of the neighborhood, my way of doing different things. And from an academic standpoint, I was just like any other high school kid. I was a knucklehead, having a little bit of fun, and wasn't really thinking about college. But then when I started playing ball and it presented itself to me, I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is something that could mean something to me. And the funny thing is, around that same time, that's when, I really didn't watch a whole lot of basketball at that point. But then a bunch of my friends were talking about the national championship game that was coming on. And it just happened to be one of the greatest of all time. It was Magic Johnson, Michigan State versus Larry Bird, Indiana.
Yeah.
And I watched that and I was kind of like, wow, this is something that, has all sorts of possibilities. Did I ever think that I could get to that level? I don't know. And I don't know if I ever really got to that level, but I got an opportunity to do some, to be a part of something pretty nice.
Did you come from a big family, Ralph? You had a lot of siblings, or?
Absolutely, yeah. I was the youngest of 6 boys.
Wow.
Okay. And I had one younger sister. And the funny thing about that is, of the youngest of 6 boys, by far the biggest. I was, 6'11". I had 3 brothers that were right around 6'5". And then, my oldest brother was the shortest in the family. He was about 6 foot. And then the brother right above me was about 6'1" or so.
Wow. So when it was like the Dalton gang out in the Old West when you guys came into town, right? It was, you guys all come walking in. That's got to be impressive when the whole family comes into a place like that.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So now go ahead.
Let me ask you one question about your high school experience.
Uh-huh.
What was your relationship with your high school coach, and how did that play into your future?
My first year, my year at Fishburne, the coach I played for there, that was the first at Fishburne was the first time that the school had won a championship in any sport, really. But we won a championship in basketball, and I had a great relationship with a guy named Colonel Miller. And we had he was also, in addition to being the high school coach, he was the actually the headmaster of the school as well. But he was very much the academic guy. So it was a combination of all, but it was the first time they'd ever won a championship in any sport. And it was, and it was a lot of fun. And I had developed a strong relationship with him.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. So now you decide you're gonna attend Georgetown University on the hilltop, and they recruit a guy who's arguably the best player in the country, and he's your size. He's your good buddy. We're all talking about Patrick Ewing. Okay.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind at that point, not knowing Patrick, because there was no email, or did you know him? But there's no emails and there's no text messaging, so you can have a conversation. I know Wyatt Maker and I had the same thing. We both got drafted. We both got recruited at the same time. They were only going to take one and not the other. And all of a sudden, we wound up both going. Yeah. So we're writing letters and talking on the phone to each other. Did you and Patrick have that same thing?
No. Patrick and I met only one time before we got to Georgetown. And I don't know if you remember a tournament back in those days, the Boston Shootout.
Oh, yes, yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, I went up to the Boston Shootout with the team, and, we're up there playing, and, we're just kind of sitting in the stand. I didn't know, and quite frankly, honestly, I didn't know anything about Patrick. I'd heard about him, but I didn't know anything about him. So, we played the game. We're all sitting up in the stand. Patrick comes up, walks up, and I didn't know who he was, but he walks up. But he knew Billy Martin. Billy Martin, Anthony Jones, some of those guys are playing with us. And he comes and sits next to Billy, and he's like, Billy, where's that other, let's just keep it clean, big dude. There are other ways to say it, but big dude going to be playing at Georgetown. And Billy kind of sheepishly looks, and he points over, and he points, that here he is right here, and he's like, oh, what's up? I was like, what's up? And that's all we ever said to each other. And at that point I was kind of like, well, I hope we get a chance to play each other, because at this point, we got some things to prove. We never got a chance to play each other in the Boston Shootout. And that was it. That was the first time I'd ever met him. Then, fast forward, Georgetown, it's time for the programs to start. We start our summer program. It was called Community Scholars at Georgetown. I lived in DC, so I got to the school early. And, I get to my room, I get set up, I'm just kind of hanging out. don't know what to do with myself. We got time to kill. We have an orientation that starts, I think, at 8:00 that night. Nobody else is around. And I'm kind of like, well, I'm just kind of hanging out. Then finally the orientation starts. Patrick comes walking in, and we go through the orientation. Then all of a sudden, they say, okay, we're done. You're on your own. You have lots of free time. You can do whatever you want. Classes start tomorrow morning at 9. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm at home. I'm like, well, you know what? This is probably my last chance. I'm going to go see my mom, hang out at home for a little while, getting ready for the next day, because I didn't know what else to do. He comes running behind me. He's like, yo, big fella, what you doing, man? Like, well, I'm going to see my mom. He kind of thinks about it. He's, all right, I'm down. And that's how we became friends. And, and it's just, and the rest is history.
Well, what was the master plan?
Wait. So you didn't think to say to him, nobody invited you. You didn't think
that. That's true.
I thought about it, but I was kind of like, all right, it's cool.
Listen, if Patrick says he's coming to dinner with you, Sonny, guess what? He's coming to dinner. You're not
saying, no,
hey.
I get it. That would have been my answer, but I'm 6'5". I'm 6'11".
Well, I'm 7'1", and that's my answer. I'll tell you that right now.
And the funny thing about the whole thing is that we go. My mom falls in love with him, and
sure.
she, Patrick was a very fickle eater, so she fixed special food for him and gave me whatever was, but she was out of love with him.
It's funny that you say that, Ralph, because on our team, Harold Presley's mom was like that. She made stuff for everybody, and Prez winds up, she made the best chicken around, and she would always make sure Chuck gets his chicken, and I would get, but it would never make it to me for some reason. Prez always cut it off,
Exactly.
So what was the master plan for you guys? Like, when Coach Thompson's recruiting you guys, were you looking to play the 5, the 4? Was Pat going to play the 4? Was it you were going to be his backup? Was he supposed to be behind you? What was the plan from when Coach recruited you guys? What did he tell you guys?
Well, there was never really a discussion about, what that was going to be or whatever. And I didn't know a whole lot about, eventually I learned a lot about who was coming in, because as a matter of fact, the military school, the athletic director and the head coach, came to me and they said, well, look, are you sure this is what you want to do? They're bringing in 3 All-Americans. And at that point, Patrick was a center. Bill Martin was, could be a big forward, could be a small forward, but basically with 3 All-Americans, and I was not an All-American. I was just another big guy. And they were kind of like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because you have options, academically, you're doing well. You're getting recruited by a lot of schools. And my answer to him was, well, I think I'm pretty good too. I think I can play. And I don't know that Coach, I'm sure he did have a master plan, but it wasn't something that I was privy to. But I think that, at that point, I was a good shot blocker. I was a big rebounder. And that was what I was known for. Could I score? Yes. But those are the things I was really good at. So I think he had options of running me at 5. Patrick was very talented in a lot of ways, as you know. He's a Hall of Famer. So it gave him a lot of options or whatever. So I don't know that there was necessarily a master plan, but, at that point, remember, there were 3 All-Americans plus me, and then there was another guy named Elvado Smith that was coming in as well.
Okay.
So I gotta ask you about, what was the practice like when you two got to face off every day? Right. And I do believe that Patrick had some very complimentary things to say about you. We'll get to that later, but talk about what it was like on the practice floor.
There were wars, basically. Yeah. We were very good friends. However, when we got on the basketball court, we were, friendship goes out the door, and literally there were wars. Unfortunately, and I do say, unfortunately, I was the one who always had to play against Patrick. There were times when they would put us together just to see how the big lineup would go. And, other people had difficulties trying to play against Patrick. So, Ralph, turn your shirt over, and I had to go on the other team, which I wasn't always happy about or whatever. But there were wars. We played a lot of hard basketball. And you know what? We went at each other hard.
Can I want to ask you about Coach Thompson, right? So you talked about when you first met him. Did you see any of yourself in him?
I won't say that I saw any of myself in him. However, what I did see is someone who I wanted to be like. He was this 6'10", very dynamic speaker, extremely intelligent.
Yep, off the chart intelligent.
Off the charts.
Everything about him, I aspired to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the most impressive thing, and honestly, that's the thing that stuck with me, and that's why I was so determined. I wanted to go to Georgetown, and as I emphasized, a lot of other schools were trying to recruit me, a lot even from the DC area, but it was never really an option. If that option was open to me, I wasn't going to think about doing anything else.
So now that we touched on Big John, on Coach, talk about your relationship, Ralph, with him. I mean, some of your, brethren Hoyas have been on with Sonny and I, and, some of them feel that the big guys got a little more love out of Coach than some of the guards did. Is that accurate, or was he an equal opportunity guy? Or talk about your relationship.
He was an equal opportunity guy. He was hard on us all.
Spoken like a true 7-footer there, Ralph.
Hey, I was.
He was giving you a soft landing there.
Believe me, I know. But in the end, everybody knows Coach Thompson. There was nothing easy about John Thompson, right?
No.
And he made sure we all felt loved. He made sure we all felt misery sometimes. And he wasn't favorable to any particular ones or whatever. He got on us all. He made life difficult for us all, but he also made it, created an environment where we could be successful in. And I think we all appreciated that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. Go ahead.
Did you guys understand some of the stuff that he was doing with the Hoya paranoia stuff, and why you guys stayed where you stayed on the road, and why you guys did certain things? Was that something that some of you guys were just scratching your head going, what the heck are we doing staying in Rye, New York to play at the Garden, for example? Did any of that come into mind? Or because I think he was misunderstood. I think he was ahead of his time with a lot of things, Ralph. And I didn't understand it till I read his book. Why he did what he did and why he said what he said in a lot of things. How about back then when you were playing? Did you guys get that or not really?
Yeah, some of those long rides we went on, back and forth, whether it was practice or whether it was the game, weren't a lot of fun. However, it created an environment, again, and this is something that I say a lot. It created an environment where we could be successful, where we could stay focused on the things we had to do. In addition to being basketball players, we were also students, right? We had to get our work done. We had to, be able to function and do things and not be under a microscope. And honestly, I think eventually, at the time, some people didn't quite understand it maybe, but I think eventually we all understood it and appreciated it because we didn't have the media all over us. We didn't have the fans, right there all the time. It gave us a chance to focus on what we had to do, whether it was basketball, whether it was school, but also to relax a little bit and just be college kids.
Let me ask you a question.
Being constantly scrutinized.
So his background playing in the pros in Boston, which is a racially challenging city to say the least, right? At the time that he played, did he talk to you guys about hey, your path is going to be different. I've been there. I'm going to make sure you're not going to be surprised. Did he talk about that aspect too, the race part too, or no?
Absolutely. He incorporated all of it into his, and the one thing most people don't know, and the one thing people don't understand, Coach Thompson spent as much of his practice time talking to us about real life things, talking to us about some of the experiences that he had, in addition, how that translated to some of the experiences that we had and that we were going to have. He spent a lot of his practice times talking about that. And honestly, that was as important as anything. And as he shared a lot of his experiences. He brought a lot of people in to talk to us as well. We got a chance to meet Bill Russell. We got a chance to meet Red Auerbach. We got a chance to meet a lot of different, people along the way, a lot of different coaches along the way. And they shared some of their experiences, and they shared some of the experiences that we were going to face, and Coach Thompson spent a lot of his time talking about things like that and sharing his experiences and sharing some of the things that we were going to, go through.
I think it's a different time from when we played, Ralph, as far as those kinds of teachings. Coach Massimino, same thing. Every day there was a different kind of life lesson, and whether it was something in the news that happened, he would sit us down before practice started and give you something to think about, for the rest of the day. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
And it was always these life lessons. And I don't think that kind of stuff, only in the top programs, does that stuff happen anymore. I mean, to actually develop and make a kid, 17, 18, 19 years old, more rounded by being able to talk about issues, and especially, social issues and things that are going on in the world. So I think we were both pretty lucky, and we played for a special kind of coach to be able to do that. I mean, you look back at that now as an older guy and you go, wow, we were, that was pretty good, because he formulated a lot of, who we are today, both you and me and Sonny, where he played. It's I don't see that. Do you agree with that? I don't see that too much in today's coaches.
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, it's very different today than it was back then.
Oh yeah.
I think back then, right now, I think there's a certain level of sensitivity that guys respond to. They don't like. Now they have the transfer portal and things like that. Well, I didn't like the way somebody said this or somebody said whatever. So I think guys are a lot more sensitive now. Back in our days, sensitivity didn't matter to anybody. You just dealt with what you had to deal with. If you wanted to stay a part of, you wanted to be a part of where you were. So, sensitivity didn't matter back then or whatever. It's very different is probably the best answer.
Yeah. I want to ask you, because the one thing that we always looked at for you, Ralph, was the shoes that you wore, the basketball shoes, and how they were laced up. And I understand there's a story why those were there. And I did not know any of this. Of course, it was behind the iron wall of Georgetown. That stuff wasn't common knowledge. So it wasn't my fault. But share with us a little bit what you went through in your probably happened in your first 3 months of college, right?
Yeah. Chuck touched on it when he introduced me. I had a severe knee injury, right? And it happened in the first game of the season, the blue-gray game, actually, where, we're playing against each other. The 3,000 fans in the stand, we're playing in McDonough Arena, a couple of quick shifts back and forth up before, I step, my leg locks, my knee pops out through the side, and literally pops out and locks, right? And at that point, the damage is done. I tumble over, my knee pops back into place. And I tore, the way they described it, everything on the right, everything on the outside, everything, through in the middle, everything in the back. And I also stretched the nerve out of whack. So since I was 19 years old, I have what they call drop foot.
Okay.
And with drop foot, which means I don't have the ability to lift my right foot. So, naturally they just, it was assumed that my career potentially could be over, but at the very least, I'd probably be out for 2 years with the injury that I had. And this was before they had all the modern day technology and they graft in new ligaments and all that. All they did was put a couple of staplers in, sew the ligament back together. But the difficult part is that I had the drop foot. So what they had to do was we had to find a way to compensate for my inability to lift my foot. So that's where the design of the shoe came.
Oh, wow.
The shoe was designed to compensate for some of the problems that I had in terms of not being able to lift my foot. So that's what all that was about. And I rehabilitated, and somehow, and I don't know how, but somehow I was able to be back within a year playing again.
That's amazing.
That shoe was as critical as anything in that happening.
Talk about how it felt. I would imagine there's a lot of pain that just continues. Is that true?
The easiest way to describe it, there was never a game after that, never a practice, never anything where I didn't experience pain.
Wow.
I always, it's just a matter of how much could I tolerate and this and that. And fortunate or unfortunate, I had a high tolerance for pain. But more than anything else, I was determined that I wasn't going to let this beat me.
Right.
So I was determined that I was going to get back, and I was determined I was going to play. And, by the grace of God, I was able to play 4 years of college basketball after that.
So at Villanova, Ralph, we talk a lot, especially through Jay's years at Villanova, we talk a lot about attitude, and that's the one thing that you can control. It could be chaos all around us, and sometimes there is, but the one thing that we can control is our attitude. How did you keep such a positive attitude as a young kid with a devastating injury that literally made the medical journals, right? I mean, you were a case in the medical journals from what I saw. How did you maintain such a positive attitude through that?
Coach Thompson played a big part in that as well. My freshman year, after I had that injury, literally they took me from the floor straight to the hospital. I was in the hospital for a week.
Wow.
I had the surgery the next morning, and then they let me out. I went back to my dorm room. It took me a little bit of time to adjust, but I also had some amazing friends that helped me to adjust. And quite frankly, they never let me not be a part of anything. I was as much a part of the team. I was at every practice. I traveled to most games. I traveled to most cities with the team. Was it easy getting around, with the huge leg cast on?
Yeah. There was no such thing as American Disabilities Act. There was none of that stuff.
So
right?
in the end, Coach Thompson played the big part of making sure that I was as much a part of that team as any. And then I was also stubborn as hell. Again, I was not going to let this, and the interesting thing is, throughout all of this, with all the pain and this and that, there's only one time I cried throughout the whole thing. The day after I got the surgery, I'm sitting there talking to the doctor, and I'm like, well, Doc, how long do you think I'm going to be out? He's like, well, at this point, we're not sure you're going to be able to walk right. So you need to stop thinking about basketball and just thinking about functioning, thinking about being a student. And honestly, that pissed me off.
Yeah.
That pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I just decided that, no, this is not going to beat me. And I just, and the minute they allowed me to start working, I started working. The funny thing is that years and years later, I went to a doctor. They did an MRI on my knee. They discovered I didn't have an anterior cruciate ligament. They basically concluded that when I started rehabilitating it the next year, I probably ripped it again and didn't know it. But what I did is I just got my knee so strong that it just compensated for it. And I played 4 years of college basketball without an ACL.
That's amazing. That's really, and I know how you felt in that moment. I had not even close to the injury you had. I had a hip injury when I was a kid in 9th grade, and I had to have pins put in my hip, because my hip started to come out of socket. And the doctor told me, that's it, you're not going to play anymore. So at that point, something clicks in your brain, was like, no way, I'm not going to play anymore. Of course I'm going to play. And you go right after it and don't think about anything else but getting back on the court, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's an amazing thing, the human spirit. It's just it's pretty cool. Now, how did your teammates react? Were they did they come to your side? Did they go see you in the hospital? Did they go see you at the dorm? How did they react?
They treated me just like anybody else. And once I got used to the idea of having the cast and being on crutches, quite frankly, I enjoyed my freshman year. I partied as much as anybody else. I went to all my classes. I did all the things. I was as much a part of anything else, whether it was on the basketball court, school, social. I was a big part of everything. And I stayed involved, and they made sure I stayed involved.
I got to ask you, with that story and that kind of perseverance, you do any motivational speaking of any kind, or you talk to any groups on this? This is fascinating, in my opinion.
Yeah, when I probably the first 10 years I was out of Georgetown, I did go speak at a fair amount of high schools and things like that. As of late, I haven't done any of that. I haven't been asked to do any of it. But at one point, I did a fair amount of it. But quite frankly, I spend, anytime I get around kids, especially athletes or, athletes who have injuries and things like that, I anxiously take an opportunity to talk to them about some of the things that they're going through and some of the things that I've gone through.
Because a dropped foot would stop the average person.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I've heard that's, I think, a side effect if you have a bad like a spinal. When you're having a baby, they give you the epidural, and that's one of the side effects. If there's damage, you can have a dropped foot. And I remember everybody freaking out. And dropped foot was the least of your concerns. You got a completely destroyed knee anatomy.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. That's Bernard King. I mean, Bernard King was out for a long time. That's worse. Yeah, that's just incredible. It's amazing. Nobody knew that. That wasn't on any scouting report. I can tell you that much.
No.
I mean, we didn't know the whole story until we started, doing our due diligence, because we are professional journalists.
We are professional journalists. Let's make
we
sure
had to do
clear.
Our due diligence on you, my friend. So, but then you come back, right? And now there was no, once you come back from that horrible thing that happened to you, now you got to go back and play Patrick again every day in practice, and he expects you to beat him up, because that's what your job is, right? To make him better. So
absolutely.
We had Patrick on the show, and we talked to Patrick about who was some of the more difficult people to play against, and here's what he had to say. Play that tape there, Chico.
So, other than Chuck, who was the toughest big guy you faced?
Ralph Dalton.
Smart answer.
That's a good answer.
We had some very good big guys, but Ralph was rough going against Ralph night in, night out, day in, day out. He helped me to be the player that I became.
So those are big words, Ralph, from one of the best of all time. And that was kind of a job as a backup. At that point, you had to push the big guys. We had to push Pinckney, you had to push Patrick. How does that make you feel to hear him say that?
It feels pretty good. I mean, but Patrick and I have been through a lot over the years. Back then, we were pretty much inseparable. And, as much as I beat the hell out of him in practice, as I was also pretty protective of him as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know that he took about 2 seconds to answer that question. You saw that, right? There wasn't even a hesitation.
It wasn't even a hesitation, right?
He wasn't going, let's see, Ralph Sampson, Elijah. He wasn't going through a list. Ralph Dalton. That's it. That's beautiful.
As you can tell by the way the question was asked, we were trying to break his chops about a game that he and I had at the Spectrum one day, but he wasn't biting on that. He went right.
Yeah, he wasn't biting. He wasn't going.
He wasn't biting on that. So, but we did have fun with him. So now you guys are into your season now, and you're back, and things are going your way. Talk about some of the Big East tournament stuff. Like I this is what some of the guys said that did you guys take a yellow school bus to games at times? Is that true? Because I can't imagine you and Patrick sitting in a yellow school bus.
No, I think our
hours.
first year, I think we did. Yeah.
Wow. I'd like to see a picture of that. I'd like to see photo evidence of you and Patrick fitting in a school bus.
If that's the case, Ralph, it certainly did not hinder you guys on the court. You must have been good and stretched out before you hit the hardwood because.
Well, and let me make sure you understand. That's when we had to go from the school out to the Capitol Center.
Oh,
yeah. They said that was a pretty good ride too. 34 minutes.
Yeah, that was a heck of a ride. But our first year, that's what we did. After that, things changed a little bit, but that first year, that's what we did.
So how do you prep for that? Like for you're leaving hours before a game, so I was joking around with Billy or Gene and said, "Man, what did you do? Go right from pregame meal to the game?"
We left. We always left pretty early to go out there because they wanted us to get there, get a chance to stretch out, get a chance to kind of get into our groove, and also to get and there was a whole warm-up process that we went through getting ready for a game. So we always went pretty early, and was it a comfortable ride always? No, but we were also relatively young, so it wasn't as big a deal.
So let me ask you a question about practice, so you're coming back from this really horrific injury. I can't imagine Coach Thompson gives you any breaks in practice. He probably rides you just like as much as anybody else.
No.
Right?
The only break I got is because of the type of injury that I had in the drop foot. In our warm-ups, when you do that slide, the get down low and do the slide, the crab slide like thing.
Yeah.
I didn't do that as much. I would just run through so that I didn't put any additional strain on the knee.
Gotcha.
But a big part of that was also my option. If I felt comfortable doing it, I did it sometimes. But for the most part, I would just run a straight line and make the turns and run and, keep doing that. But no, Coach Thompson didn't let up on you. It didn't matter. He didn't let up on much of anything. Okay,
let's talk about some of your opponents. We know that your opponents in practice were tough, but talk about some of the games and the teams and any experiences that you remember.
There were wars. The Big East were wars back then, right? Whether it was Villanova, St. John's, Syracuse, Pitt was still a big part of it at that point as well.
Yeah, Pittsburgh was good.
I mean, Connecticut was, and at times were, as big a.
Yeah, they were coming. Yeah, in Seton Hall. Yep.
Yeah. So the Hall. So there were a lot. I mean, and even Providence at that time or whatever, because we had friends who played on Providence as well. So every Big East opponent. It didn't matter. It was always a war. Always a war.
Now, Coach Thompson and Coach Boeheim, we all know that animosity ran deep and I know from talking to a couple of your brothers that Coach Thompson thrived in that environment and enjoyed it, right? Was that ever part of your, like, a little bit more motivation to get Coach B? You can be honest. Nobody's going to see this. Go ahead.
It didn't matter which arena we went into. They hated us.
It is true.
Whether it was at Syracuse, they were throwing fruit or money at us.
Yeah, the orange. That's right.
Or Villanova, it didn't matter. They hated us. St. John's, and even at St. John's, we had as many fans that would come out, at the Garden as St. John's fans or whatever.
Yeah.
But they still hated us, and quite honestly, it was motivation. It was motivation.
How did that feel, Ralph? I mean, you guys always wore the black hat no matter where you went. So therefore, you got everybody's greatest effort every time you stepped on the floor, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It didn't matter where we were going. And the best way to put it is we didn't sell out a lot of home games, right? Only a few of the big games a year would we sell out. Right. But every place played on the road was always sold out. They always.
Oh, yeah.
And, quite honestly, it was fun. It was fun.
Let me ask you about the Final Four experiences. You had 3, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes. The first year I was hurt, but I was a big part of it as well.
You're part of it, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So now you have Hoya Paranoia going national, right? And I know that if you guys played, let's say if you guys played in Miami, you guys were going to stay up in Jacksonville. I know that's the deal, right? So talk a little bit about what that was like and to experience it now on just a completely national stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first national championship we played in the Superdome, right? Down in New Orleans.
New Orleans, yep.
We stayed in Biloxi, Mississippi. So, and, we had practice, so that was like a 2-hour ride back and forth every day. But it was crazy, because we would drive in and we'd see all the craziness that was going on. And it was, in a lot of ways, it was fun. But quite frankly, once practice was over and we got out and we went back to our quiet little sleepy town, that we appreciated that, quite frankly. And then we came back into the craziness, but in the Superdome, what was it, 67,000 screaming fans.
And you're going up against the Blue Bloods. And here's this young upstart Georgetown from what conference? This is the ACC. Exactly. We're like legendary.
But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And, on that team, we had 6 seniors. So we had great leadership. And that's what helped. That's what made the difference, because those seniors, they showed the way. But then you mix in, you got Patrick leading, you got, Bill Martin, a big part of it. You had other guys playing as well. But those 6 seniors, that's really what got us ready for what we had to do. And that's what, they're the ones who showed us the way, because they've been there before.
What was it like, Ralph, when now, everybody knows the story about Fred with the ball late in the game against New Orleans, in New Orleans against Carolina. Yeah. What was it like to see Fred get his redemption and get his ring, and that moment with him and Coach Thompson hugging at the end of that game? What was that like as a teammate of Fred's when you saw that?
That was special. That was special, because
I imagine it would be.
Freddie wasn't always the starter that year, but quite frankly, Freddie was a big part of that. Everybody talks about what Michael Graham did, what Reggie did, Patrick did, and they all did a lot of great things. But Freddie was a big part of that. And then when that happened, and Coach Thompson gave him that big hug, that was a very, very, very special moment.
Was that out of character? Was that out of character for Big John?
No, not really. Not
publicly
really.
Like that? No.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, yes, but not really. Coach Thompson, he was a hard man, but he was also could be a generous man as well, right? Coach Thompson was somebody who could curse you out and call you everything, and his favorite saying was, "Call you everything," but was the old saying? I forget how it goes. Whatever. He would call you all sorts of names. Right? He would call you all sorts of names, but then 5 minutes later, you'd be walking down the hall. He'd have his arm around you. He's got you laughing like crazy or whatever. That was just his nature.
Well, he loved you guys. There's no question, and I think you guys were all his just extended family.
Yeah,
during that season, that '84 season, Ralph.
Yeah.
I guess at some point, that was Reggie's freshman year, right?
Yes.
So at some point, he leaves the team for a week.
Yeah.
Okay. Which this is Reggie that told us the story. That's why I'm relaying it to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point, what were you guys thinking? Where the heck is this freshman going? Did anybody try to figure out what was going on? How did that all work out with the rest of the guys?
We all wondered about it, but quite frankly, the coaches / the assistant coaches took care of it, and he was back.
Right.
Okay. And it's just, and we were happy to have him back. You have to adjust. Coach Thompson wasn't always the easiest person to get along with. He stayed on you. It took some getting used to. So
I'm sure as the number one kid in the country coming in, he wasn't used to being spoke to in
absolutely.
a certain way, and I think probably as a young kid, that probably had a lot to do with it. I'm thinking, right?
It took some getting used to. Believe me, it took some getting used to.
I bet.
So what were your experiences after college? You got drafted, right?
I did get drafted, but with all the stuff we talked about with my knee, I got drafted, I think, in the 7th round to Cleveland. Cleveland drafted Brad Doherty at the time. What's the kid? Martin out of North Carolina. They drafted like 4 big guys.
Yeah, Harvey Martin. Yeah.
Yeah. They drafted 4 big guys that year. And it was kind of like, well, you know what? At that point, I'd finished my first year of grad school. At Georgetown, I was working on my MBA. And I was just kind of like, well, do I really want to chase a dream, somebody else's dream? Because it wasn't mine. Again, I didn't focus a whole lot on that.
Right.
And with the issues I had with my knee, I just felt it was better for me to just go back and finish up my MBA at Georgetown, get that done, as opposed to chasing somebody else's dream, because I didn't know how far that could go. So I didn't put a lot into it.
You were the first guy to get his MBA, right? At first basketball player to get. That's great.
I
that
think
you're able
so,
to take advantage. Pretty awesome. So let's talk current day a little bit, Ralph. Okay. The Hoyas have had ups and downs, and you and I talked on the phone a little bit. I'm rooting really hard for Patrick and his guys, and I was so happy when they won the Big East last year. If we couldn't win it, and I texted him when you guys beat us in the Big East tournament. I texted him and we had a little conversation, and I told him what a big win I thought it was for the program and everything.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the thorn in his side? Is it the portal? What do you think it is with the way college athletics is today? Because you see all these guys now, Coach K, Williams, and now Jay Wright all getting out and retiring because it's not fun anymore. It's not basketball. There's more to it. And Patrick being an old school guy, talk about that for a minute. What do you think is going on there with that stuff?
I don't think the portal makes it easy for anybody at this juncture, right?
I agree.
The one thing, that we haven't talked that hasn't been added to, that you haven't mentioned, is that the last 2 years have been COVID, right? And that's just taken a lot of energy out of a lot of rooms, right?
Yeah.
The combination of them all. But I think COVID played a big part this year. It took some of the energy out of the room or whatever. And then I just think they just struggled this year. I don't think it's anything that'll ever happen again.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I think they've had an amazing recruiting year, and I think they're going to come back stronger this year. And I know that Patrick will never let that happen again.
Oh, I agree with him. Plus, you got the big guy coming back now he went to Maryland, figured out he made a mistake because he was a key guy in your run for the Big East title,
Exactly.
So now he's back. Go ahead, son.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think literally, think about this, like 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to talk to high school kids, or you're going to talk to some kids, or maybe 15 years from now, and you're going to explain what happened with COVID. And nobody's going to believe you. When you say, listen, they shut down a season, they didn't play, the NBA played in a bubble. Like that's just not going to be understandable to that community. So I do agree with you. I think that's a huge impact on the game.
Yeah.
And kids in the experience. Can you imagine being in college and you got to be online and you can't even get to meet people? Like you said, You have a torn up knee. You are going through everything with crutches and everything else, and to get a college experience and socializing and partying, that's gone.
Yeah.
That experience is gone.
Yeah.
That's hard.
It's even more personal for me because I have, my youngest daughter, as I was telling you, Chuck, when we talked the other day, my youngest daughter finished up her sophomore year, right? Mm-hmm. She played volleyball in college. She lost her whole freshman year to volleyball, but she first off, she lost her high school graduation to COVID. There was no prom, there was no anything, but she took it like a champ. Then her whole freshman year of college at her school, the first semester, they only let freshmen on campus. They didn't really have a season. Then the second semester, they let seniors and freshmen on campus. And it was just kind of a weird year, but she's handled it like a trooper, and honestly, I think she's probably handled it better than most kids, but I think all the kids have just they've been through a lot, but they just keep on chugging. They keep on doing it, and they're handling it extremely well. And in the end, I think it's going to make all of our kids, it's going to make all of these kids stronger.
Well, look at the role model she had, Ralph. I know you're a humble guy, but I wouldn't expect anything less from her. And I've never met the young lady, but I would never expect anything less than that. Look at what you went through. And I'm sure you talked to her about stuff like that, you and your wife, and, and that's just a tribute to the two of you, how you raised this girl. So kudos to you. My hat's off to you for sure.
Yeah, it's not a shocker, right?
What was that, Sonny?
It's not a surprise. Plant corn, get corn, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So now you get drafted, but now that's not going to work out for you. So you go on to have some success on Wall Street. Talk about that for a minute. Now you were down on Wall Street for how many years?
28 years.
Oh,
28 years.
That's
28
great.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bounced around a few different firms, but spent the longest time at Merrill. And enjoyed what I was doing. I was doing.
Over the years, I've heard your name mentioned a lot down there because guys like Plansky were down there. Gary McLean was down there for a half a minute. He'd said he would tell me that he would run into you from time to time, and that you did pretty well. Is there a big, like at Villanova, we have a huge network. How was the network at Georgetown for stuff like that to get hooked up on in things over there, like the Wall Street and Merrill and places like that?
Quite frankly, just about my entire career, on Wall Street, a Georgetown person was instrumental in helping me along in getting jobs and making sure I did well. My first job out of college, I worked for a relatively small Wall Street bank. The president of the bank was a Georgetown graduate. My next job, the guy who ran that firm was a big Georgetown guy who also played basketball back in his day. My job at Merrill, a Georgetown guy actually was instrumental in helping me get that job or whatever. So I think there's a pretty good connection. Our alumni base is pretty strong, as I know Villanova's is, and same goes for Syracuse as well.
Yep.
There's, and in addition to that, on Wall Street, there are a lot of Big East guys, and they do love athletes in that environment.
Yeah. It's interesting because back then when we were playing, Ralph, I didn't really get the power of networking, like I do now.
No idea.
No idea. And some of the people that, were that you should have been networking with, some of them I couldn't even be in the same room with at times. You know what I mean? It was difficult as a kid because you didn't really understand what was going on. But what a powerful thing. And I'm sure you talk to your kids and stuff about networking and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get down to it, Ralph. What are the top 3 stocks we should be buying right now?
I wish I had an answer for that.
That's right.
But as you know, the big craze now is Bitcoin. but that's even struggling a little bit these days or whatever. But that's the that's the new craze. That's the thing that everybody's all up in arms about now.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are you these days, Ralph? Are you still on the street, or are you with a different company now?
I'm still related to the financials to a certain extent, but also kind of in the mode of looking for new opportunities at the same time.
Okay.
Somehow I think it's going to work out. Somehow.
Oh, I know.
Somehow I think it's going to work out for Ralph.
Are you kidding me? So okay. Two questions left, and then we'll cut you loose. So are you still in touch with your guys? Do you talk to any of the guys? And, let us know what some of your teammates are doing these days.
Well, I think you talk to a lot of them, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, we know what some of them are doing. Maybe the people that are watching or listening don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously, I'm pretty close with Patrick. You know what he's doing. He's coaching. Yep. Gene, I'm not sure to define what Gene is doing. You know what Bill Martin's doing. He's out in the Midwest, working in insurance. I'm not sure what Michael's doing.
How about Mike? What's Mike Jackson up to? He was a very successful in the media and with the Yes Network and with TBS, and he was a high-ranking official in those companies, right?
So worked pretty strong for the Olympic Committee as well.
Yeah.
And I want to say I think he's still with Nike. He's been pretty darn successful with Nike as well, right?
Yeah.
He was pretty high up there with them as well.
Yeah.
Horace Broadnack is coaching at a school down in the South.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. You've been in contact with Reggie. I'm not sure exactly what Reggie's doing now.
Yep.
Mike.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that you guys stay in touch somewhat, and that you're still involved with the guys and stuff like that.
Patrick is a big part of that.
Yeah.
He, for years, Patrick has made sure brought a bunch of us together, in different environments or whatever. And he's been a big part of that. Patrick is better at networking than most of us are.
Yeah.
And I think it served him well.
The game that Sonny and I went to this past season, we were down at the Syracuse game at the Cap One Center when they dedicated the floor to Coach. Yeah, and we must have run into about 15 or 20 basketball alums, right, Sonny?
We did. Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot of guys down there. So it was good to see a lot of guys that come back to games and stuff. Both Syracuse guys too, and Hoyas, but it was good to see a bunch of those guys.
They tried to get me to come back to that, but quite frankly, COVID the last 2 years has been a scary. I've got enough comorbidities that.
Yeah, right. You don't need any more. I get it. So last question. So a kid comes to you and, is asking you, what does it take to be successful in life and in athletics? What do you tell a kid?
Positive attitude, drive, hard work, focus.
Great advice. There you go. You couldn't have said it better. You couldn't have said it better than that. Very simple and right to the point.
That's a TED Talk right there.
Ralph, I got to thank you, man, for coming out. It's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing your story. I don't know, a lot of people know about the stuff that happened to you, and and it was really, really good that you were able to share some time with Sonny and I, and we chopped it up a little bit. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely been my pleasure, guys.
Ralph, thank you very much.
Thanks. So you've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Spera. The Big East Rewind was produced and directed by Nick Chico Corus and Daryl Gurney. You can check us out on all things social media at Big East Rewind. Also, to see the shows, you can get them where you get your podcast. But if you wanted to see the show, it is on YouTube, and in the search bar, put in Big East Rewind, and all 62 or 3 of our shows will come up and you can check them out. All right. We ask you that you like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot and have a great night.